Hello, everyone. Welcome to our lively video discussion about the collaborative model. My name is Ashley Beck. I'm your moderator, and we have an excellent group of panelists here to discuss the magic behind a successful collaborative model. And more importantly, or just as importantly, a multi-sector collaborative model. So everyone from businesses to policymakers to nonprofits and grassroots initiatives involved in moving forward, generally a shared vision. So I will let you all introduce yourselves.
I'm Rachel Cohen. I'm the owner and CEO of Aging Dynamics Consulting Firm. So we work with nonprofits, for-profits, and public agencies all across healthy communities. So that means that we are working across sectors, from aging to healthcare to public health to social services to housing and everything else in between. It's about people in place. We provide strategy and community engagement and qualitative research services. And one of our projects, one of our exciting projects, is LinkAGES Collaborative, which is a multi-sector collaborative. It's a supported backbone model, which means that at the center, we have organizations that represent housing and long-term care, health and wellness, social services, arts and culture, education, and more, who are all committed to addressing social isolation through creating opportunities for meaningful connections. And the supported backbone, our role is to remove all of the barriers to intergenerational programming. And there are 4 or 5 common ones, of which I'm sure that we will address at some point today, but collaboration is a huge barrier to intergenerational programming. It is, as we will talk about today, incredibly difficult for multiple organizations to come together around a similar mission.
Hi there, I'm Kristine Burrows. I'm the Director of Aging Care and Connections for Jewish Family Service. And we are a human services organization that serves anybody and everybody in the community. You do not have to be Jewish to receive services and programming from JFS. My department specifically focuses on folks who are 60 and older. We provide a variety of nutrition resources and meal services, kosher meals on wheels and kosher congregate meal programming, homemaker services, care management. We have a really robust Holocaust survivor program. So we kind of go from the very basic needs services all the way up to like life enrichment and social isolation programming as well. In addition to being the Director of Aging Care and Connections at JFS, I also serve on the board of the Next 50 initiative, and we're a proud funder of the LinkAGES Collaborative.
My name is Phyllis McConn. I am the Community Impact Officer for the Tahoe Truckee Community Foundation in Northern California. And like other community foundations, we geographically embrace a community, if you will. And so we do everything we can to strengthen the community within our, boundaries as set out in our bylaws. As a funder in our region, we try to be as flexible and open-minded as possible in funding the nonprofits in our region and supporting them as much as we can. And to be honest, we expect collaboration. We understand that, as Ashley mentioned, you can't do much without it. It's hard for any one organization to move forward and move the needle at all without the collaborative efforts of all. And so we look for that, we encourage it, we try and fund it in every chance we get, and we measure success by that. So that's how important we feel it is.
I'm Jared Bloomfield. I'm our National Field Manager at Wish of a Lifetime. Wish of a Lifetime is a nonprofit Denver-based, but we do grant wishes to seniors, people 65 plus, all over the United States, and our entire model is really steeped in collaboration. The idea that the whole issue around aging is very complicated and it's very multifaceted. And it's my view that everybody kind of takes their little piece of the pie. And so, of course, there's housing, there's food security, there's mental health care, there's healthcare, hospital visits, nursing homes, and then there's that enrichment side. And that enrichment side is really important to wish of a lifetime, as that's really our area of focus. But the only way that we can provide productive enrichment and wishes to older adults that we're working with is to identify groups that are providing that other stuff, so we can partner together to support older adults in whatever they need, and hopefully grant some amazing wishes. So really excited to be here, really grateful for LinkAGES for the collaboration and building out the opportunity to really educate senior communities, volunteers about what we do, and build rapport to successfully make connections. So collaboration is a never-ending work in progress, and we're grateful to continue to invest in it.
I'm Ashley Beck. I've been a nonprofit professional and consultant for a little over 10 years. I've done everything from grant writing to events planning and hosting, fundraising, donor cultivation, strategy, and grants coordination. Collaboration is really close to my heart because I believe that anything that is going to get successfully done fast enough in this crazy world needs to be done collaboratively amongst funders, the for-profit sector, government, and the philanthropic sector. We're going to be talking more deeply about each of these parts, but for now, just know that collaboration is a really important part of the world because the issues we're facing are massive, they're global, they're systemic, and no single organization is ever going to be able to solve them alone, whether that's the next big tech startup or a nonprofit in the mountains in California.
So essentially these two things are linked, right? So collaboration itself is an act of working together. But a collaborative is a much more formalized structure. So it's when a group of entities, and I say entities on purpose because that could be nonprofit organizations, for-profits, public entities like government, and individuals, doesn't have to be a formal organization, come together around a common vision, common mission, and bring all of their individual visions and missions to the table. But it is where there is a commitment to work together. It's much more of a managed process. Collaboration happens within a collaborative. So that's when entities are working together, but it may just be much more of a singular action. So it could be collaborating around an event where we're all recruiting together. It could be, collaborating on a grant, one specific grant, but it's not necessarily it's not formalized necessarily. It's a little bit of a gray area, but what we're talking about today is having collaboration leading to a collaborative, having collaboration within the collaborative, but it's really having that formalized body together working towards that common mission. We're all part of an ecosystem, and each one has its own role, and each role is dependent on the others, even if they don't see that. The success of a business in a community is dependent on policies that support it, on consumers that support it as well through purchasing. Nonprofits are also all interrelated because just because a nonprofit is considered to be a mission-driven organization doesn't mean a for-profit isn't a mission-driven organization. So they can all be working for the better of their communities, just from perhaps different IRS designations or different perspectives, but they're all part of the same ecosystem. And in order for everyone to be successful, they've got to be connected.
So I'd love to turn to Phyllis now. I feel like my time in the Truckee-Tahoe region really, it's like a little petri dish where you have everything that Rachel was just talking about in one tiny geographic location, and where sometimes quite literally resources can't come in from out. and people can't get out to resources like a hospital or a dentist office, or even to a governmental meeting that could decide their zoning laws or what resources they receive. So the community foundation there works really closely with the nonprofits in the community and with the businesses and elected officials. The community collaborative of Tahoe Truckee is actually headquartered within the same offices as the community foundation. So can you tell us a little bit about the history there, Phyllis? Because CCTT, the community collaborative, has been around for like 23 years or something. And so the history there, and whether or not working so closely with a collaborative changes the way you're able to work as a foundation.
Sure, thanks, Ashley. Yeah, the community collaborative of Tahoe Truckee is a formal collaborative, as Rachel spoke about, and it's been around. It predates our community foundation by at least a decade. So it was a viable organization or group for over 30 years. Our community foundation has been around about 24 years. We are the umbrella organization for the community collaborative. The staff, the director and the administrative assistant for that director are employees of our community foundation now. And honestly, that was to give it the stability that a backbone organization needs, and also keeps that group from competing for funds that all the other nonprofits that are collaborative members typically are striving for. And yes, there are many collaborative efforts for grant making, but the collaborative itself, that backbone organization, is typically not in competition for those funds in this way because of the way we have established it and have a stable budget for it for the most part. So I hope that answers the historical question on that. And then you ask, I think, about how that informs the work we do as a funder. Is that right, Ash?
Yes, and actually the way that the collaborative came under the community foundation was through a major grant from another foundation.
Yes, a private foundation actually set up an endowment. They saw the importance of the work in our region that the collaborative was doing and wanted to make sure that it extended in perpetuity and wasn't constantly trying to spend all of its efforts, for its own existence. So they set up an endowment within our community foundation, and the earnings off of that endowment pay the operational budget for our collaborative. So, and having it housed within the community foundation, honestly, before COVID, most of the meetings of the collaboration were held in our offices, in our conference room, or we had members, other staff members coming and going through a lot of the initiative work that the collaboration was doing. As a funder, I actually do attend collaborative meetings. We have monthly resource sharing meetings. I'm on the steering committee for the collaborative. There is an executive committee of the collaborative. All of these things, all of this formal structure, just to keep us pointed in the right direction and streamlining it as much as possible so that when the efforts are put in, there's actually output, instead of just the spinning of the wheels and duplication of efforts. And, oh, I didn't know you were doing that. We're doing that too. There's just so much sharing of information that happens. And so while sometimes people think it might take more time to run a collaborative, it actually, in the end, saves time and saves efforts and makes us all stronger.
What LinkAGES was able to do is support programming which allowed really desperate nonprofits, because most nonprofits are, and Wish of a Lifetime was as well, for funding, for support, right? And so to come into the program knowing that there's an opportunity for funding, then what happens is you realize all of the wonderful collaboration opportunities. And I'll just say from Wish of a Lifetime, that's been more helpful than even the funding that we received through the collaborative. So we came on a couple years ago, and we've been working on a project to send veterans to Washington, D.C. through an intergenerational collaborative with a high school in Gold, Colorado, and ended up getting funding for that program, which is still ongoing due to COVID. But what we saw in year 3 or 4 of the collaborative was not just that we were getting funding for our programs, but that groups like JFS and a few other senior living communities were starting to send wishes to us. We're starting to engage in our volunteer activities. And so it's just my opinion that there has to be a little bit of a carrot at the beginning of working with a collaborative, because it is a little bit of extra work. But once you're there, it is worth it. And like Phyllis said, it does benefit you in the long term. But I'm interested in what Kristine has to say about that.
Thank you.
I think we wind up with this sort of, I think you mentioned it, Ashley, scarcity mindset that like there's only so many ideas in the world, or there's only so much funding in the world, or whatever that looks like. And so as a group of aging professionals or professionals in the aging space, I think it gets really easy to sort of think about like how, if I share this idea, is somebody going to take it and run with it? Or if I, is there any type of competition? And I think so in some senses, I think there was a little bit of nervousness around how much do we share? Are we in competition with our collaborative members? And I think the reality is that we're absolutely not in competition with our collaborative members. It's such a community oriented organization and group that anytime somebody has an idea, or we have brainstorming sessions all the time. I have this idea, but I need help fleshing it out a little bit. How can we make this work? I think that's the beauty of the collaborative, is that we'll come with very raw ideas and come out of a meeting with something totally set up and ready to go, and we just need to put it in place. So sort of letting go of those fears of what the competition looks like, and recognizing that we're all here to serve the community and kind of in our own different pockets.
I think there's a number of different entry points for a collaborative. In my experience, some of the most successful ones are the ones that are coming together around some kind of change that they want to see. They have the shared passion. They are approaching it from different perspectives and using different interventions, different tools, different skill sets, different resources. Then they start to come together. So that steps in that readiness piece. I think that a critical part of that is doing some strategic planning. I know for some, when they hear the word strategic planning, they start blanching and going, oh my God, we can't spend a year or 2 years, or oh my God, making lists, another SWOT analysis, and dear God, please no. The way that I do strategic planning, we'll say, is a very dynamic, introspective, and then looking outwards kind of process, with the intention of taking a moment and saying, okay, what is it that we are all most passionate about? What is that change, right? What will cause that to come about? Taking the time to do a little research and say, is anybody else already addressing this? And if they are, is that way effective? Do we need to create something new? If the answer is yes, we do, then we take the next step and say, okay, who is at the table right now? Each one of you, what's important to you? What is your organization's mission? What are your resources? What's your potential commitment? What are your expectations and needs from a collaborative effort? So that we have an idea from the very beginning, to Jared's point, of where are the carrots, and then where's the support that we need to have built in here to enable all of these folks to stay at the table and to really engage. And yeah, money's one piece, but also beautifully, as we just heard, it's not the only thing. It's those relationships and connections. But you have to do your homework to make sure you have the right parties at the table and that you've created an inclusive table. That is the other piece, where as we start to form that collaborative, it's not just who's there on day one, it's who else needs to be here. Who are the other voices? And are they, from our maybe a traditional standpoint, a nonprofit? Or are we saying we really need to engage those that have lived experience with whatever it is that we're talking about? And then what does that look like? How do we get those voices here? And so when I say strategic planning, it's asking questions, it's engaging in conversation, and then it's really being willing to be curious and kind of push the boundaries a little bit. That just because collaborative, XYZ worked really well over here with this structure, it doesn't mean it's the same thing we need for this purpose.
I think looking out for somebody that has a really strong mission and vision, and I'll just give you an example specifically to LinkAGES. It's about intergenerational connection, but it's about multi-point intergenerational connection, not just one senior visiting one student once. It's building a relationship. And initially with Wish of a Lifetime, that wasn't really what we were doing, and it didn't really make a lot of sense to us. Like, we weren't sure how we were going to be able to execute it. But I think a collaborative that is expeditious would probably say, well, just forget about it, do what you can do. But LinkAGES was really firm on that. And now as we're building out our strategic plan, Rachel doesn't even know this, long-term intergenerational relationships are going to be part of it, because LinkAGES proved that, we need to do that and we can. So I think that's one thing for funders to look at, is making sure that there's a couple of points that the collaborative is really firm on, and that's the only way to drive success.
With the LinkAGES collaborative in particular, we chose from the beginning to use an MOU, use a memorandum of understanding document that clearly lays out investment going in two directions. And so one direction is from LinkAGES to the member organization. And that, is a variety of things, from access to dollars, access to endless technical assistance, marketing, us telling the stories and uplifting all of our members, all of that. But the commitment needed to go two directions. And so each member fills one out every year, and we work with each member very specifically to say, what are your strengths? Because each MOU has to be different, just like each member of a collaborative is different. And we don't always recognize what our strengths are, and we don't always recognize what capacity we have to bring to this collaborative. But that dual investment creates ownership of what we're doing together. It keeps us at the table more than just funding being available. I think it's also having a clear understanding of expectations of the members, making sure that the right staff, if we're talking about an organization, if we're talking about an entity where there are staff, it is making sure that the right staff are at the table. So it's those that, as we've said, those that can make decisions and those that are doing the programs, and can have two, and sometimes a guest can show up. But I think having that mix has really helped and enables us to have a group that's not just meeting to exchange information. We're doing stuff. And part of those MOUs is a commitment to doing. I think that's really critical. If you're going to set up a collaborative that's going to address something, address a need, address a specific outcome, there needs to be action. It cannot be yet another group where you just meet to exchange information. Fatigue sets in super quick with that. Yeah. You also need to make sure that you are valuing everybody's experience, because every single member of that collaborative is there for a reason and brings something to the table. And so that's not just acknowledging it in introductions, it's creating the spaces for those individuals to be able to stand up in the way that makes sense for them. Sometimes that's presentations, sometimes that's experiences, come and see, come and experience our program, that sort of thing, so that we can all celebrate that knowledge, and we can, to Kristine's point earlier, be able to know that we can rely on each other when we've got a problem, or we just have an idea, but we don't know where to take it. Well, now we know that we have a table full of experts, and we're celebrating that and respecting that at every single time we get together. We know we've got depth. And when things like a pandemic happen, which hopefully does not happen that often, we are able to lean on each other. It's not one organization on its own. It's not one organization figuring out how to pivot and shift and get fatigued. It's everybody relying on each other to get through whatever that point in time is. So there's a lot more ingredients, but those are kind of top of mind.
We want to see sustainability, and we want to see something that's going to be replicable, and what the community needs, or I would say 3 of the big ones. So I think within LinkAGES, we obviously have the sustainability piece because we have so many organizations. We're so committed, to Rachel's point, we're reliable and we're committed to the collaborative. And so, that sustainability piece is really important. And then impact, we want to make sure that we are able to fund opportunities that are going to make an impact in the community. And I think I use the metaphor of boiling the ocean. I come to the dinner table every night with some sort of boil the ocean idea. And I think with LinkAGES, there's an opportunity to boil the ocean because we have so many people and so many organizations who are saying we want to focus on intergenerational work, which is so critical. And so making sure that impact piece is there as well.
Denver is huge, and that has been like such a joy for me, coming from the small mountain community to like this ecosystem where there's a lot of funders, a lot of funding, a lot of like big ideas. So I'm less familiar, are there other strong collaborative efforts that Next 50 has seen or that you've seen?
Not like LinkAGES. LinkAGES really is a large group of collaborative organizations. At one point, we did have a fund looking at like communities who are working together, and to be honest, it didn't work as well as we had originally anticipated that it would, because I think it is hard to create a collaborative that's successful and sustainable. And so I think that's part of the magic of LinkAGES, is that it is successful and sustainable, and has promised to keep going for several years.
I want to turn back to something that Rachel mentioned, like when a pandemic does happen. It's my understanding, because I wasn't part of LinkAGES during COVID-19 or during the lockdown of COVID-19. So it's my understanding, and this question's for you, Jared, that you all saw your membership really come together throughout that period of time. And it's almost counterintuitive because so many organizations were needing to cut programs, and were like, the whole world was like battling fires day by day. And did you continue to show up for meetings? And if you did, what motivated you to do so when you probably had a lot of other things on your mind?
Yeah, great question. So I think the team came together, for 2 reasons. And we've talked a lot about the power of collaboration in a like tactical sense, but from an emotional perspective, a lot of members in different nonprofits are burned out and isolated. And so it's a nice opportunity to get a group together to support one another. So I think in the first couple of weeks of the pandemic, that collaborative was really important, or any collaborative would be important for that way, just for the emotional support. But then what happened, and I give Rachel a lot of credit, and to Kristine's point, like LinkAGES is a very unique collaborative in that Wish of a Lifetime had a program going on. I had alluded to it earlier, where our hope was we were planning to send 15 veterans to Washington, D.C. with 25 students from Golden High School for our first ever intergenerational trip to Washington, D.C. We had been sending veterans to DC for years, but the idea of having students and veterans go together was super exciting. The trip was scheduled like March 30th, and the pandemic hit like March 13th. So immediately when we were talking to Rachel, we had funding concerns, we had programming concerns, and the answer was, we have to do what's right in the moment. And that was really appreciated. And so throughout the pandemic, we did programming between veterans and students at Golden High School to continue to connect them remotely. Some of it worked, some of it didn't. But I think the beauty of LinkAGES was really viewing it as a really embracing the difficulty. And that was what was important, embracing the mess, realizing that when you try new things, it's not always going to go perfectly, and having a supportive environment to encourage that, I think, was really, really key. So again, emotional support was really important, but the reason that we came back month in and month out is it was a very non-judgmental way to solve problems, knowing that the circumstance we were in was incredibly unique. And you know what? I'm sure Rachel can speak more to it. I think LinkAGES achieved more in the year and a half during the height of the pandemic than most collaboratives or most groups. So that willingness to try things and fail was a key thing. And Rachel's always done a great job with that. And I think that's why this collaborative has been really successful, and why collaboratives need to be really open and non-judgmental and as again creative as possible.
One of the first things we had to do was kind of make sure that that trust was there. And again, to Rachel's point, everything always has to go both directions. And so as a funder, we wanted to knock down that wall that kind of separates, who's getting money and who's, giving money, and realize that we're all in the same boat together, and we're all have a shared goal of, strengthening our community. So we really started out overhauling just our regular grant making to be more trust-based philanthropy. That we weren't looking for the bright, shiny squirrels all the time to fund. We were actually, developing these long-standing relationships with the nonprofits in our area. And we were using our annual grant cycle to not necessarily fund a new shiny project or program. We're always open to those, but we're really just using it as a check-in to kind of see where you are, where the needs are, where we might be able to help, in addition to grant funding, which, there's never enough of that. And one of the things we realized really quickly was, a dollar spent for capacity building typically has more impact, more long-lasting impact than a dollar spent for a program, to be perfectly honest. Our tangible example where I'm from is that we had several basic safety net organizations that were working in their silos. Again, some of that because of county lines and that kind of thing. And we originally came in and as a community foundation to solve a problem. They were being forced out of their office space and their programmatic space, because of just the cost of living where we lived and all that. So our community foundation bought an old hotel and redid it and provided shared office space with, controlled rent, if you will, for these nonprofits to come together and have this shared space. And then the next step was integrated service models. Like, oh, okay, well, if you're doing this and then the same people show up for this service, then let's integrate that and have them only have to tell their story once, and then, point them in the right direction to the services that they need. So we started that integrated service model. And from there, it went to, well, why don't we just merge these organizations? They would have more buying power, if you will, and could apply for bigger grants if they were consolidated. And so that took quite an effort. But basically, we took 4 standalone organizations and merged them into one basic needs safety net organization for our entire region. And that all happened right before COVID. And honestly, I don't know how we would have gotten through COVID without them in that way, because they were able to just do amazing things as this integrated, collaborative body at that point. So it ended up wonderful. So, difficult, but wonderful.
It's incredible that progression.
I was lucky in that when I joined JFS, we were already a member of the collaborative, and so that decision was made easily for me. But I think one of the things that I have really enjoyed the most about the LinkAGES Collaborative and gotten the most out of is the fact that we're all, like I said earlier, we're all working towards the same mission. So like when COVID hit, we're all thinking about how do we move our programs virtually? How do we think about reopening? How do we engage better as community members? How do we engage better as collaborative members? You know, we're all working on the same things. And so when I go to a meeting, I come out of a LinkAGES meeting with my cup full, and I'm full of ideas, and I have new strategies and to move our work forward, both within JFS and I think within the LinkAGES Collaborative in general. So I think my biggest takeaway is that piece that we're all working together, and that anybody who needs assistance or needs help with that can receive that from a collaborative like LinkAGES, or LinkAGES specifically.
Thank you. Do you have any tips, like if somebody were to onboard the way that you did, like how did you dive into the LinkAGES materials and community while onboarding to a new job?
Rachel was fabulous, and the collaborative was fabulous. It's a group that is so open and non-judgmental, like Jared had mentioned. You can ask questions, and you can, you know, kind of be vulnerable about what you need and what you're looking for. And I think that onboarding was made so easy by that process, and recognizing that there's so many different projects and groups within LinkAGES. There's a lot of material to learn, but it was made so easy because it was such a safe environment to do that in.
Set goals before every meeting. I think Rachel talked about it. You know, there is some risk with other collaboratives of people just talking for an hour and a half and leaving, right? And so to create those goals, whether that's to collaborate with a certain group, whether that's to brainstorm a project, whatever it is, bringing a goal to the table and trying to execute it or have a follow-up for that has really helped us be more successful, and I've kind of seen it in the rest of the collaborative as well.
Wow, excellent answer. I didn't realize that.
I think, you know, boards, you know, want to be prudent and careful with their funding, and they're somewhat risk averse and all of that. And I think when you explain the work of a collaborative and sell it in that sense of you have someone keeping an eye on everything and keeping that holistic view, and holding people accountable, and having, you know, this shared agenda, and you know, and even if there's, you know, agreed upon metrics that they're going to measure over time, all of those things that formalize and strengthen you know, this collective impact of a collaborative. If you can get in front of funders or, you know, program officers or whatever, private foundations, and explain that in a way that they can take that comfort level, and you know, and kind of, you know, suddenly have that epiphany of like, oh, I'm not just paying overhead, you know, or this is that, you know, you mentioned that middleman that, oh, now I've got to carve out some funding for that. But when you explain that role of it and why it's important and why not one organization can be held accountable for all under a collaborative without that structure, and how it keeps it on task and all that, I think they finally start seeing that their money is well spent. If they're supporting that.
You know, I think it's doing a lot of what Phyllis has said, but I'll summarize that. So I think that funders play a really critical role in recognizing how to support collaboratives. So first, it is ensuring that longer term funding. So if it's a new collaborative that we're calling for or that's emerging, it's that recognition that it takes time. It's not just getting, I mean, as we've talked about today, trust. Trust takes tremendous amount of time to develop it. Having that comfort level to be able to come into a meeting and say, oh my God, this is not working like we thought that it would. That takes time and effort. It takes guidance. It takes strong facilitation. I think funders can also assist by having accountability for collaboratives. So what funders can do is create that environment where there is that ongoing funding, where there is that understanding that, like Phyllis was talking about with organizational assessments, each entity, whatever their IRS designation, 501c3, LLC, government, are all at different places of maturity, different places of capacity. And so we need to also build in the capacity building. It's really important. One of the reasons I think that LinkAGES has gotten to the point that it has in 5 years, where we have organizations stepping up and doing more and different programs, being willing to say, oh, we got a problem, let's figure it out, is because we're taking the time to meet them where they're at, to ask what their strengths are, and to help get them stronger, knowing it's not just about the collaborative. So funders need to have that long range vision that, yes, we're funding for this purpose, but we're also funding the long term, because we want this organization to do well outside of that collaborative. So that capacity building is helping them grow, be more present, have a greater impact, and also recognize, to Phyllis's point earlier, that sometimes it makes sense for organizations to merge. We don't need 75,000 different nonprofits, right? But being able to have a collaborative with that support, with that extended funding, to build the trust and the understanding that it takes time, makes a huge difference. And it can be hard for funders because we want immediate. We want, not always, not every funder by any means, but we want a program. We want an impact on a set of individuals. What we're talking about with collaboratives takes more, and it takes a recognition that it's about the organization, and whether it's people or trees or water or whatever it is that we're trying to affect an outcome on. It's all of these different layers have to work together. And that's where we need our funders. And many of them are doing it. The two here that are on this call or in this webinar are standing up and doing that. And we need more funders to recognize how their dollars can have greater impact and be more effective.